6:30, so I think we will get started here. I'm Christine Sleeter from California State University, Monterey Bay. I'm the past president of NAEM. And it's my real distinct honor to be able to welcome you to this session this afternoon featuring the Mexican American Studies teachers. When Betty asked me if I would convene this session, it was a session that I really wanted to be at anyway, but I was thrilled to be able to do so because it gives me a chance to really publicly say how much I just genuinely have appreciated and admired the work that you've done. So I'm really excited to be in this space where I'll be sitting and learning from you. Following this split session, there had been questions from people about why the Mexican American Studies teachers are in one room and the discussion of education reform is going on at the same time in the other room, and shouldn't this all be happening together? So that's how the program got planned. But if anybody would like to continue a follow-up discussion, bringing the two groups together, a room has been made available, Catalina, on the second floor over in the Executive Conference Center. And so that room starting at 2 o'clock. Those who would like to continue the discussion, bringing the groups together, go over there. And then if you go over there, I actually encourage you to stay in that room because another session has been moved from a different room. This is session S3009. The session featuring one of the 2 exemplary teacher awards. Pang Xiong will be doing her presentation on multicultural education, the realities and practices of a classroom teacher. And so that will be in the Catalina Executive Conference Center on the second floor, not the room that's listed in the program. Okay, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce to you the moderator of this session, Dr. Anita Fernandez. Dr. Fernandez is a scholar activist at Prescott College here in Arizona. She's the director of the Chicana Institute for Teaching and Organizing, and she's been active in local and national organizations focusing on Chicano Latino education, immigrant rights, and ethnic studies for quite some time. She's also been quite instrumental in continuing the legacy of the Mexican American Studies program, together with the Mexican American Studies teachers represented here on this panel, through the program Chito and by offering college credit to high school classes of students who complete Mexican American Studies classes. So it's my real pleasure to be able to welcome Anita Fernandez.
Gracias, Dr. Sleeter. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to say some quick words before turning it over to the panel, because that's what we really want to hear from. This panel is aptly titled Tloque Nahuatl, or Together and United, the Mexican American Studies story. And it's an attempt to offer an accurate historical context of the battle to preserve the Mexican American Studies program through the voices of some of the teachers who lived the experiences, which has often been missing from the myriad of attempts to chronicle the story. The emphasis of Tloque Nahuatl demonstrates the focus away from individualism and toward a collective consciousness, a focus that counters the state's agenda to eliminate programs and ideologies that don't focus on individualistic, colorblind paradigms. I'm deeply honored and humbled to be moderating this panel of maestras and maestros who have greatly influenced my own practice, teaching and also as an activist. But most of all, they've modeled for me the importance of humility, especially in the midst of struggle. They've helped me to understand the concept of resilience steeped in love, not an amorous love, but what Freda refers to as an armed love, a love rooted in a committed willingness to struggle persistently with a common goal or a true vocation, to be human, and in that vein to fight for the humanity of our communities and our children, which I'm sure will come out in their testimonials today. So please join me in welcoming the MAS teachers. provide some historical context to this program that was so successful. The battle for an equitable education for Chicano students started well before the recent fight to counter HB 2281. So what were the roots of the movement that led to the creation of the Mexican American Studies program? Oh, I forgot to have you all introduce yourselves. Sorry. Okay.
Mishpancinco New York, me cayó sin Newana Toca Norma, Chane González, Tlamanalca, Nazteca Mexica, Tlazo Camati, Atom, Iwan Yoene. Good afternoon and good to see you all here.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Sally Rose and I teach at Pueblo High School.
Hello, my name is Salo Escamilla and I teach at Tucson High. Former MAS teacher.
Hello, my name is Jose Gonzalez, and I teach middle school, Ross Ridge. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sean Arce, and it's an honor to be here with my compañeras, compañeros. I used to teach in the Mexican American Studies program and was a director for the last 4 years of the program.
He's got that DJ nighttime voice, and I don't, so it's kind of intimidating to follow me. I want to just thank you for coming. Buenas tardes. And this is a dream of mine to be on a panel with my colleagues. Not all of us could be here, but the invitation was there. So in spirit, they're all with us right there. You know, they haven't passed away or anything like that. Anyway, did I say who I was? No, I'm Curtis Acosta, and I used to teach Chicano literature at Tucson High School for the Mexican American Studies Department, and now I just crack jokes.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history behind not just Mexican American Studies, but Chicano studies in general. And I mean, a lot of people could put that beginning date at a lot of different times. You know, if we really want to be technical, it started when Columbus came in 1492, right? Because that's when the resistance began against this kind of indoctrination, I guess, which we're accused of. But anyway, for me, it started during the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 70s. And we have to go back to those days to really talk about when was it when Chicanos across the nation started to question their schooling system and question some of the things that were happening there, things that were happening to them. Here in Tucson, for example, I mean, people used to get hit for speaking Spanish in class. And you have generations and generations of kids who don't speak Spanish now in Tucson because of their parents' experiences in the schooling system. But I want to point specifically to somebody who I think, I don't want to call him a founder or anything like that of the Chicano movement, but I think somebody who really pushed the Chicano philosophy. And somebody that's really forgotten in history books, and that's Rodolfo Corti Gonzalez. For me, I want to also talk about for me when Chicano studies started. And I was a high school student in Lafayette, Colorado. It's a school called Centaurus High School. And I was invited to attend a conference called La Raza Mel Youth Leadership Conference. And when I went to that conference, I remember not really knowing anything about what was going to be discussed there. Just knowing that I was hungry for some kind of knowledge, some kind of knowledge that came from something that was relevant to me. And so I attended this conference, and I remember the energizing, sense that I got when I was there. Chicano claps, chants, Chicano power, Viva la Raza, all these energizing, positive things that were happening. And during one of the workshops, a guy told me, he said, you gotta read some literature about your own people before you do anything. And one of the works that I want to share a little bit with you today, because I think we forget about it, is Yo Soy Joaquin. So I just want to read a little bit of it to you, so we can all reflect back on how this all started, in the United States. I'm Joaquin, lost in the world of confusion, caught up in the world of a gringo society, confused by the rules, scorned by attitudes, suppressed by manipulations, and destroyed by modern society. My fathers have lost the economic battle and won the struggle for cultural survival, and now I must choose between the paradox of victory of the spirit, despite physical hunger, or to exist in the grasp of American social neurosis, sterilization of the soul, and a full stomach. My people have come a long way to nowhere, unwillingly dragged by that monstrous technical industrial giant called progress and Anglo success. I look at myself, I watch my brothers, I shed tears of sorrow, I sow seeds of hate. I withdraw to the safety of the circle of life, my own people. I am Cuauhtémoc, proud and noble, leader of men, king of an empire civilized beyond the dreams of the Gachupin Cortez. I am Nezahualcóyotl, leader of the Chichimecas. I am Joaquin. I rode with Pancho Villa, proud and noble, a tornado at full strength, nourished and inspired by the passion and the fire of all his earthly people. I am Emiliano Zapata. This land, this earth is ours. The villages, the mountains, the streams belong to the Zapatistas. Our life or yours is the only trade for soft brown earth and maíz. Hidalgo, Zapata, Murrieta, Espinosas are but a few. They dared to face the force of tyranny, of men who ruled by farce and hypocrisy. And now I sit here looking back, and I see the present. In a country that has wiped out all my history and stifled my pride. I shed tears of anguish as I see my children disappear behind the shroud of mediocrity, never to look back to remember me. I am Joaquin. I must fight and win this struggle for my sons, and they must know from me who I am. I am still here. I have endured in the rugged mountains of our country. I have survived the toils of slavery of the fields. I have existed in the barrios of the city, in the suburbs of bigotry, in the minds of social snobbery, in the prisons of dejection, in the muck of exploitation, and in the fierce heat of racial hatred. And now the trumpet sounds, and the music and the people stirs the revolution, and like a sleeping giant it rears its head to the sound of tramping feet, clamoring voices, mariachi strains, fiery tequila explosions, the smell of chile verde, soft brown eyes of expectation for a better life. And in all the fertile farmlands, the barren plains, the mountain villages, smoke-smeared cities, we start to move. La raza, Mexicano, Español, Chicano, Hispano, or whatever I call myself. I look the same, I feel the same, I cry and I sing the same. I am the masses of my people and I refuse to be absorbed. I am Joaquin. The odds are great, but my spirit is strong. My faith unbreakable. My blood is pure. I am Aztec prince and Christian Christ. I shall endure. I will endure. And those are the words of Corky Gonzalez in 1967. I get really choked up even just last night. I was reading it again, trying to reflect back on when I was a high school student, and I was thinking how deeply these words changed my life, and it made me a completely different person. And so anyway, but we started getting involved because of things like this. And in the 90s, I was part of Mencha with Sean, and you could talk a little bit about that history. But it was because of this kind of literature, this literature that opened my eyes to activism, social justice, to identity, to self-determination. And if it wasn't for things like this, I don't think I would be where I'm at today. So that's a little bit about the history that I experienced. But maybe Sean can add to that.
Wow, gracias, Salo. It's always powerful to reflect on some of the works of our antepasados, those who have paved that path for us. But following along with what Salo had explained, yes, it was an acknowledgement of our history, of our culture. In the early 90s, there was a real resurgence of Chicanismo, particularly indigenismo, with the Zapatista uprising, with the passage of 187, Proposition 187 in California is when, these things really mobilized us here in Tucson. Accompanying, we had people like Professor Dr. Rick Orozco at Sunnyside, not waiting for permission from the school district to implement and teach Chicano studies. So we had mentors in the community and we gathered and we organized and we worked in the high schools, mentored the high school students and said there's no reason why we should not have a responsive education for Chicano youth. Also acknowledging and bringing honor to our parents, because the schools do not allow our children to bring honor to ourselves, to our community. So for example, my mother's here in the back, you know, those of her generation, where being Mexican was a dirty word, and it still is today. And unfortunately, our school district has succumbed to that racism, but these strong warriors that sit beside me here know the importance of identity, and that Mexican is not a dirty word. That is a beautiful word. We have a beautiful history. And that's what we have to do. We have to honor our antepasados. We have to honor their struggle. We have to understand that, you know, through those processes of Americanization in the schools, where their names were changed, where their hair was cut. You know, my mother was an example of that. My father, my tios, that happened to them. And so in a large sense, we had that understanding, and we knew the critical importance because we knew we were operating in a crisis. During the 90s, here in Tucson, as throughout the Southwest and urban centers, we had children killing each other at unprecedented numbers, and we knew that was a direct reflection of what was happening. That we knew that was a direct reflection of colonization, of internalized oppression, and so we acted upon that. And we didn't ask the district; we demanded of the district that we had a full K-12 Chicano Studies program. And historically, it's really a beautiful thing. We have people like José Gutierrez from La Raza Unida Party, who was the lead attorney for people in the community, and that said, you know, we're going to invoke here the Treaty of Hidalgo, we're going to invoke the Treaty of Mesilla, the Gadsden Purchase, and say, these students here in Tucson have been neglected since the inception of the district. They have been marginalized, dehumanized, and so now it is time to move forward and implement this program. So the convergence of our understanding of the history, our activism as machistas at the University of Arizona in the late 80s, early 90s, and the activism of the youth at the time in the high schools, demanding for Chicano studies. So that's a little bit of the historical context from which we're operating. And I think we really need to study that history. There's too many folks here in this town that really ignore that. And we've really taken a step 50 years back or more with the elimination of Mexican American studies. My colegas here have stood strong and know the importance. And once you gain something within an institution, you either hold on to that and fight for it and continue to work towards transforming the structures, the policies, the practices of the institution, or you give in to racism, or you give in to the hatred. But we cannot do that because our parents, our abuelos, are the very reason why we're here. So we might not have be in the ideal positions within the schools. We may have been fired from the schools. Nonetheless, I really believe our dignity is more important, and we continue to fight for having Chicano studies, for having Mexican American studies. Gracias.
Thank you, Sean and Salo, for laying the foundation. I think it's such an important historical context that we don't always have in the story, in the narrative around Mexican American studies. So moving into the program itself, one of the unique aspects of the MAS program was the use of a Chicano indigenous epistemology. So could some of you highlight for us why this decolonial framework was so important to the success of the program?
Yeah, so this is a framework that we use, one of several. We utilize many frameworks within the program. And this is a decolonizing framework. that has as its goal liberation. A liberation that is rooted in acquiring a purpose in life, and moreover, a framework that responsibilizes it. So, when we see our students taking over the board meetings, and we see them out there struggling and trying to hang on to their education, that's that responsibilization that came with the framework that we implemented, and it comes from our ancient teachings that we have to think about and we have to reflect on the 7 generations before us and what they did so that we can have what we have today. Chicano studies didn't come easy. It took, our antepasados tremendous struggle to get to that point. And so now the responsibility is on us, and it's on our shoulders to continue in that work, to continue in that struggle. And so, it's that sense of responsibility that we had and that we have that allows us to do what we can, what we do with our students, but then also pass on that responsibilization to our students, because now they have to think about the 7 generations ahead. So it's the 7 generations behind and the 7 generations ahead. And so as students of history, we are very well versed in the story of colonization of our people, but not just our people, all people, because we are all colonized people. And it's the same story for all of us. We can go back 500 and some years, but then we can go back further to the origins and the roots of that colonization. And so we know that we're not in a post-colonial era. We know that colonization is not gone. We're in it. We're living it. And so with that in mind, we know that when our students come into our classes, we have colonized students. And in that colonization, you act a certain way because you've experienced psychological trauma, because you've experienced a taking away of your history, of your culture, and that is trauma. And so we knew early on, and through our historical perspective, that's what we were dealing with our students. And so our students, they resist the educational system that pushes them out and that dehumanizes them. And so those are the things that we thought about, when we were looking for the framework that we can apply, that we can, utilize on a day-to-day. And so what we did is we looked to our history, and we looked, we came across this framework that's known as the Nahui Olin. And it's within that framework that was created thousands of years ago that serves to guide the people, to help people to live in balance and in harmony from within and from without, with all of creation. So it's a very humanizing pedagogy. And so we know that as colonized people, one of the first things that the colonizers took from us was our identity, essentially taking away our culture. And what that does to you is it kills you. It's a way of killing people, taking away their identity and taking away their culture. And so we knew that what was going to be critical for our students is to help them to regain that identity and that culture. And that's what we did, with this pedagogy, this framework, the Nahui Olin. And so we understood, that to be able to utilize this framework with our students because of our lived experiences, this is a matter of life and death. Because we can help our students to regain that identity, to regain that culture, and that's what's going to help to bring it back to life. And so that's the Nahui Olin, and that's what it provides them. It provides them that vehicle to rehumanize, which is, of course, the opposite of what the educational institution does to our students.
Well, bless my soul, what's wrong with me?
I'm a disgruntled teacher. I always wanted to be Elvis Presley, so I was like, my Elvis Presley impersonation. I'm sorry. Couldn't help myself. But thank you all. you know, it's important, I think, just to recognize that, you know, what we've been accused of is obviously has no foundation to it, but these principles that we taught, we live by. And, you know, this idea of humanizing, you know, Brother Augie over there, you know, introduced me, I'll speak from that perspective, to Paulo Freire, you know, and I've always had, and I think that was the beauty of it, we've always had different philosophies and flavors and whatnot, and we were able to really grow, but Freire falls short. You know, Freire talks about rehumanization, and it's a beautiful chapter in Pedagogy of the Press, and so this is where this, you know, this indigenous epistemology that scares the heck out of me, unfortunately, you know, but our kids gravitated to it, you know, and it humanized them, and I want to say that you know, all our kids were not Chicanos, you know, there was I've had African American kids, etc., and it's a human thing, and that's what we taught. And we taught love. And I think one of my students said it, our student said it better, Jesus. You know, he says, you know, you can't outlaw love. And that's what they did. And so that Nawi Olim goes back thousands and thousands of years. And it's beautiful. And it's for all humanity. And that's what we taught, and I'm very proud of that. So that's a little history of that indigenous epistemology, framework, methodology that we utilized in classrooms and was so effective.
I just wanted to add that, and I wish that we had time to present the framework, because it really is beautiful, and it's also connected to the Chicano paradigm, which some of you may be aware of. But the focus is on non-competition. We're not in this. We're in this together. We're humanizing. It's at the social justice core. We are family. We have to progress together. And it was very effective. We are still using it in our classrooms, and it does fit very well with the levels of consciousness we're analyzing society.
I just wanted to share that, you know, that I feel like the movement, or movements in general, they go through this evolution, you know, and one of the things that I remember experiencing when I read things like Corky's poem is that I remember getting really, really angry. Like, when I first started reading this stuff, I was so angry, like, that I had never heard about it, or never had it in any class, and it's kind of hard to know what to do with that anger when you're like 16 or 17, and the indigenous epistemology is what really brings that humility to this work, to saying that, you know, like, when you're reading these new kind of documents and kind of getting angry or getting upset about how things are in the world, and then you think of Tezcatlipoca, and you're like, I need to reflect. I need to reflect on, before I do something, I need to reflect. And you think of Quetzalcoatl, well, maybe I need to learn more. Maybe I need to learn some more precious knowledge before I do something. You know, and then you think of, then when you feel like you got something together, then you go to Huitzilopochtli, and that's action and willpower, you know, and then that leads to Xipetote, which is transformation, you know. So I just wanted to add that is that it helps you deal with that anger, these four Tezcatlipocas.
So as everybody here knows, eventually the program was banned and outlawed and removed from the Tucson Unified School District, and we hear so many accounts and see so many films and hear academic articles about this fight to preserve Raza studies in Tucson, but what we don't often hear is an account from the teachers. So what stands out to you all from the perspective of individuals who are at the center of the struggle, together with your students and families?
So one of the things I think Salo just touched upon, you know, is really the transition, because he started naming the framework that Norma and Jose were speaking about, and not only were they speaking about, Norma and Jose were like are my mentors, are my maestro when it comes to operationalizing that framework. And not just operationalizing that framework in the classroom. Well, first understanding it, and then we all worked on operationalizing in the classroom. I think it's important to note earlier what Jose said, maybe not different philosophy, if I may, Jose, is say we have different styles, right? And I think that's the power of our collective, is that we weren't the same type of teachers, that we weren't cranked out on an assembly line. We come from vast different experiences, different backgrounds, different parts of this continent, you know, how we grew up in our families, those experiences. And yet, as we worked as a collective, we used all of that beautiful, you know, stuff, right? To get, like, the Chevy guy, technology and stuff, if you got to see the World Series. The guy that was sweating and all nervous, he said, he got, you know, like me right now, he's like, stuff, right? You know, so that real PhD language, stuff. Anyways, we took all of our cultural capital, there you go, cultural wealth that we had experienced, and we put it all together like it's a big, you know, like a big pot of menudo, and stirred it together, and it came out good. And I think that this framework, then, since you don't have this like dreamed up teacher theoretically that you may be writing about in a book or whatnot, that you have this real experience to base this upon, lends more credence to the successes that we had and the replication of this in multiple contexts, plus the idea of the humanity aspect. So this humanity wasn't just a teaching tool, it was a tool for our lives. And that leads to the struggle, the idea of la lucha, which is much better than, you know, we use a lot of language about, unfortunately in English, especially in this country, we use a lot of violent military language when we want to talk about human struggle. And lucha has a different feel to it, right? So it's nicer for this type of talk. Even good-hearted folks like all the folks here will say fight, war, things like that all the time. We need to get weapons to fight, and that's not this. And that also shows our colonization, by the way. And what we were trying to do is decolonize ourselves as maestras and maestros, as a collective, through learning la cultura pura, right? Learning from our culture. And anyone can do that. Because if you go back into anybody's culture, you're not going to find that nasty, violent language that I just used. But these indigenous epistemologies that Salo just named were the way we navigated not only the classroom, but that feeling of anger he's talking about, of when violence is being done to you constantly, right? Whether it's symbolic violence or whether it's literal violence, you know, or whether it's, as Norma alluded to, the trauma of growing up as a Chicano in this country. You know, and you can put in your own, you know, also, you know, all the brothers and sisters out there from different backgrounds of being violated and under the thumb of domination, right? You can substitute Chicano for whatever, whomever you are. But that's what we share. But how do you manage that? And so when our students in the classroom, as the stuff was going down, stuff again, now I use that stuff on purpose, because the other word is not right, but you know, name, should be using that kind of bad language, right? When things were coming down from the Attorney General, from the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, from our own school board, from our own superintendent locally, the students were looking at us. You know, it's one thing to say in Lakesh every day as a morning recitation. You know, those beautiful words by Luis Valdez. It's one thing to say it as a poem. It's a beautiful poem. It's another thing to live it. And I tell you, it's another thing when you and your colleagues are being called racist, hateful, brown supremacist, all this stuff, dehumanizing language constantly by not only the media in your town, but the colleagues and your bosses. It's one thing to take all that and have the students demand of you how you are going to navigate this struggle. Whether you were really about in Lakesh. Are you really about us? And that heat, it's not weight, it's heat, is something. And but the word humility is beautiful there, right? That Salo just used. That's humility, to lay your ego down in that moment of wanting to throw a right hook. Because they were waiting. They were waiting. Give us permission. Give us permission to blow this place up. And we had to stay real cool, and we had to check in with each other. And that's the strength of being a collective, right? Being together. Being a union, or whatever, however the language we want to use. Family, dysfunctional family, but family. That's the strength of it, because we were allowed to, I was always stronger, and I still am. I carry them with me wherever I go now, because it's so ingrained in me, but I'm always stronger right here. Always. And I was always stronger when the young ones were looking at me. Because when I see my colleagues here, I see my family. I see my abuelas, and I see my abuelos and antepasados that suffered far worse than what we had to go through. But we went through something, and that should be noted. And our way that we all reacted to that should be noted. And the way that we still work and walk amongst each other today should be noted. And however you want to interpret those notes, those emphases, the way we walk with our former students to this day. It was great. Bill Ayers said yesterday, right? He asked the panel about, I wanted to answer the question. He's like, what do we do with our students that don't go to college when we start talking about college all the time? There's a lot of people with those funny hats in this room, right? In your closets. I don't have one yet, so I can make fun of you still. But yeah, we can kind of, because it's our world, of education, right? That's the ultimate, right? But that's not the ultimate. It's an ultimate, but it's not the ultimate. We have students all over our community that we're still tight with this very day, who maybe didn't go to college, who are beautiful, civically engaged, much more so than other people with 3 letters by their name that serve on our school board. So, these are some of the things that come to mind when I think about the weight that we have, and also the heat that we have, and the obligation that we all have, and something I'm very proud of.
All right, so I know people are eager to hear about what is currently happening in the legal battle against 2281, and also what work you are all currently engaged in as you move forward.
Give the legal update.
Okay. Some of you may know that when the law was passed, or actually before it was passed, we began to organize around a legal struggle. Various struggles here in Tucson. There's a political struggle, a cultural struggle, and internal struggle. Nonetheless, the teachers came together and filed in federal court. The teachers were found to have no legal standing. Since then, our children, our very own children, 2 of my children, Maya and Emiliano, and then Lorenzo Lopez's children, 3 of his girls have since then filed in the 9th Circuit. The 9th Circuit Court of Appeals has scheduled a date for Monday, January 12th, 9:30 a.m. to challenge the constitutionality of HB 2281, now Arizona Revised Statute 15112. And it's very, it's kind of, it's just unbelievable that we're in federal court fighting to tell our history, our culture, our stories. It's just amazing, this day and age, 2014, that this is even an issue. Nonetheless, we're moving forward with that. We're very excited. I know Curtis, myself, and my colleagues are organizing some events to be taking place in the Bay Area, specifically San Francisco, around before and after the January 12th date. But again, we're very excited, very anxious to move forward. It's a critical fight. Chicano Studies has never been in the federal court. but we're not surprised. You know, our culture, our history, our culture, our language, all those things are very, our very humanity has been on trial since 1492. So this is just something that is continuous with that colonization, that dehumanization. But the beauty about it is that we live to struggle. The struggle is something that is beautiful.
Yeah. Not necessarily. I'm not going to add necessarily anything to that, except we're excited for that moment in history coming our way. And we'll let more people know about it. What's a good way, like the Shipa website, you think? Yeah. We'll probably put things on ChicanoInstitute.org to let people know about the events coming. And we'll do it on probably Facebook and other ways too. But those are in the planning process right now. So, but we're looking forward to maybe having a Saturday teach-in where we not only our literal, case and maybe some of the pedagogy and curriculum, the voices of my colegas is part of the programming, but also what's going on in the Bay Area, the amazing work with ethnic studies out there in San Francisco and Oakland, and then also just nationally, maybe we'll use it as another platform to talk about networking nationally. So we'll keep you posted on that. One thing I wanted to read, it was like, I wish Wayne was here, because I have his book. Him and Eve Talk compiled Youth Resistance Research and Theories of Change. And I was reading Dr. Acombe, Antwi Acombe, and then Alison Scott, and Akita Shaw's chapter, which is called Rethinking Resistance Theory Through STEM Education. And here's a part in here that I want to read. If we want to create sustainable forms of resistance, we need to create structures that resist domination, communities that resist domination, cultures that resist domination. We lived that. So that's pretty cool. We were the structures. We were inside. We were inside the institution, resisting domination. Kind of the ghost in the machine that Wayne was talking about yesterday. And then our community. I mean, there's so many folks here. Dr. Cindy's here, Avi's here, Sean's mom's here, Wade's here. I mean, there's so many people. Dr. Combs is here. I mean, there's so many of you here. I'm sorry if I left anybody out, but it gets old. My colegas from Tucson. They were with us. So there was the communities resisting domination. Our students, I wish our former students were here. They were resisting domination. But there's a part missing in this that I will probably try to talk to Dr. Acombe. What about our leaders? Our elected officials? Were they resisting domination? They weren't. And they still aren't. So, now a lot of those leaders we have came from our communities, came from similar struggle. They know better. But it's our obligation to remind them. It's our responsibility. And I want you to go back to your communities right now and put those people in your heads. You got them too, I'm sure. Right? They look like you, but somehow they're not acting like you anymore. And you don't know what just happened. But when we have all these other three areas going. We have the communities resisting, we have the institutions resisting. All right, we have families, our students resisting domination, but we need politicians that resist domination. Now, it seems counterintuitive, but we ask teachers to do that all the time, right? It's like, okay, I benefited from this unequal system, right? Because I got my degree and now I'm teaching. Now I'm going to be part of dismantling this unequal and awful and unjust system. That's what I'm going to do with my life as a teacher. I'm going to be a part of empowering these young people because that's not who's in power. But they have the power. So that's what we did. That's what we were about. That's what many of you do, what you're about. I believe we can have politicians that can do the same thing. Like, yeah, I got elected, and maybe I won't say this anymore because I'm tired of hearing this phrase, mañana. Right? I'm tired. It's not just a word, it's not a phrase, but wait till the election's over and then we'll talk. Chale. I'm tired. I'm tired of it. But that's what we hear. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because Prescott College has this opportunity and laid this thing out and worked with a community that has a closed school on the west side of Tucson, where my family grew up, right? My wife, her family grew up, and there is a collaboration there where to open up that site for Prescott College, so that Prescott College can do work with the community and our children, right? To do work with the community, our children, to offer, as some of you may know, that I created a class right after the end of MAS on Sundays, and it was free, and Prescott College gave us college credit, gave those kids college credit for it. We raised the money for it. Maybe some of you raised the money for it and got those kids free college credit. That's institutionalized. We just need a space, right? And then if I'm the problem, which some of the officials think I'm the problem, that's fine. I don't need to teach it. But don't rob our community anymore. And don't tell us mañana anymore. Let's see it happen. Let's do it. I hope they can hear me. And that's what we want to do. We want to do professional development for TUSD teachers, concurrent, work for TUSD teachers. I shouldn't say we, because if I dirty the pool, I'm out. That's cool. I'm out. Because I want that for our kids. So, and then they do. We still have real bad names around here. Well, not here. Well, here too, yeah. Oro Valley, yeah. They don't know our names up here, but they wouldn't like that. But I'm serious when I say if it's a matter of personalities that can't be involved, please, that's fine. But let's build those beautiful opportunities for our children. I mean, it'd be great to see professional development and concurrent classes for our youth, so that the teachers can learn and then go back to their sites and take it over and run with it. That would be beautiful, but it's being hung up by all this refusal to resist nomination that Dr. Combs talking about. So I would ask Dr. Combs, maybe in the revision, to add that. We need people in power who are elected from our own areas, with our own dispositions, that come from our own families, to resist domination. Because otherwise we're conforming to domination. That's what we're doing. I'd like my colleagues to talk about Shito, what we do there. If that's cool. Norm, what's that?
So Chito is how we're moving forward. It's for us, it's good to be able to come together again and to create spaces for teachers to learn about these frameworks, to come together and problematize our institutions and provide transformation. And so we've had 3 institutions, and it's been well attended. A lot of great connections, and it's a space where we can continue to do the type of work that we did in our classes at the national level. And so I'm fortunate, to be a part of the group and to be able to provide this and just to continue to learn about and become, the critical educator that I need to be for my students in my class. But yeah, so Chitos is a way that we're continuing to move forward.
We're also in the process of writing a book, and we've really excited about that. All the teachers, and so we're beginning that process and working with the publisher, and we'd really like to, our work is being codified, and our voices aren't in there, and so this is a way, and I think we've been doing this for a very long time, pushing back. It's that counter narrative in critical race theory. It's so needed, and so it's a counter narrative to what's being written out there, and so we're really excited about that opportunity and that chapter in our life.
as far as moving forward, we have two, Curtis and Sean are both doctoral candidates finishing up their PhDs in language, reading, and culture at the University of Arizona, smashing that Chicano pipeline, so we'll have 2 more PhDs to add to the roster, which is very exciting. We have folks out here who are working in and out of the district, writing curriculum, being leaders, both in pedagogy and methodology and philosophy of education, folks that are doing incredible community work, and so everybody is moving forward in their own way, and yet all of them are still moving forward as a collective, which is just a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch and to be a part of. So I think at this point we'd like to open it up for questions, and we do ask that they are questions, just as we heard yesterday in one of the panels. It was, please don't make a statement, but we would rather hear some questions so that you have an opportunity to hear more from the teachers. Yeah.
How else can we help around the nation move this work forward?
You know, we often get this question, and there's some things we'll find out soon about the Ninth Circuit. That's one way we can help, but the biggest thing that we could do as radical educators, as progressive thinkers, is to assess the needs of our community and create something that is responsive to the needs of our youth, our familias, and our home communities. That's the biggest thing we can do. While we were eliminated here in the state of Arizona, I think we provided a lot of, I know we provide a lot of possibilities for elsewhere. LAUSD was inspired by my colegas here. They're pushing for a mandatory ethnic studies in their schools, LAUSD being the 2nd largest school district in the nation. All over the place. We get calls all the time, how come, you know, what does the curriculum look like? What does the pedagogy look like? How can you all collaborate and help with this? So going back to your question, I believe the biggest thing we can do is work in our own communities and create something that is responsive, that is revolutionary, that is transformative in terms of education.
You had mentioned that the panel is going to serve the purpose of countering the narrative. What narrative? I think I'd like to know what that narrative is that's being countered here. I think the assumption that there's an understood narrative, I know that is very particular to the superintendent. So I'm speaking to what is the superintendent's narrative? What is the narrative to the department that's in place that has that culturally responsive practice label? And what way is your narrative countering theirs?
Well, that's a tough question. But I'm gonna have to try to step in the shoes of I guess next door. But and it's really hard because I'm not an administrator, so I don't really understand some things from those shoes. But at the same time, I think the narrative in the district is that what we're bringing back now, or what the district is bringing, CRC, which is culturally relevant curriculum, is in a sense bringing Mexican American studies back, which is not true at all. And I'm not trying to put down culturally relevant curriculum because, I mean, that's what I've done my whole career as a teacher. But what's going on now isn't necessarily what we were doing back then. And that's just the truth. I mean, as far as our narrative is that we need to get, if we're gonna, I think, me personally, I can't speak for everyone, but I have an expectation that, I've had one for the last year or so. I was told, that once we have a majority on the board, that things were gonna start moving, that things were gonna start changing, that we were gonna get back to how it was before, that we would have a Department of Mexican American Studies. I heard some talk that they want a different name. Well, orale pues, let's have Chicano Studies. That's my opinion, instead of Mexican American Studies, but that's something separate. But either way, there's a bunch of narratives out there, I think, and yes.
I'll add something really quickly since I brought up the issue of this being sort of a counter story. What I was referring to is that there's a whole lot of experts on the Mexican American Studies program who have never stepped foot in the Mexican American Studies program classrooms, right? And a lot of those people are in higher education. And some people have written beautiful, you know, very well-informed pieces, but as is the case in higher education, oftentimes stories are taken and made to fit a certain agenda, which is we need to get tenure, and we need to do these things, and there has been a lot of acclaim that certain folks have gotten all over the country that doesn't necessarily include the voices of the community or the children or the teachers. And so this was an opportunity to really hear from the people who were in the trenches, on the ground, you know, doing the work. So that's part of it.
Can I say one more thing about that? I just remembered, you know, I'm teaching 2 classes of CRC at Tucson High, and, you know, when people ask me, you know, is MAS coming back? I tell them, you know, in my class it's coming back. In my class, Chicano Studies is coming back because that's what I was trained to do. But I can't speak for everyone else because I don't know them. I don't know everybody that well that is in this new process. So it's a process we're going to have to go through, a path, you know, a journey, I would say. And I don't know where it's headed right now.
And if I could add to that as well, you know, what disgusts me is how our children's lives are like manipulated, played with, toyed with, and there's no fucking accountability. So, you know, we've always said that, you know, we were going to work to bring this back, and we have a lot of work to do. And so we are working with the Culturally Relevant, and, you know, with the Culturally Relevant Department, and Sal Garbalon, who's a good person. He's the director. Sal Garbalon is the director of the Culturally Relevant program, and we're working with him in that process of trying to bring this back, but we are nowhere near that. And but we got a lot of work to do. And what really upsets me is that you know, we're having to start all over again. And just so you have a little context, you know, people look at us as if we taught the overthrow of the United States government. To this day, you know, they think that we taught racism to this day. And that's that counter narrative, you know. Again, there are people that want us to. So we are, you know, working with the district and bringing back these classes, you know. And there's a lot of haters in our community, and it's just like it's colonization. So you deal with it and you move forward. And there are people that say the only reason we got involved with this struggle is to bring attention to ourselves as teachers. That's nonsense. We as a collective decided, as a collective, and we make decisions as a collective, that we would never, ever, you know, work with Dr. Petitcombe. And that's what we, and B, you know, don't go look up north at Huppenthal and Horn. It was Dr. Petitcombe, and he lives here. All right, so let's just name it. And we haven't. And he's out. So we are back in the trenches, rebuilding what was once something beautiful, and all children should have been exposed to. All children, and we were never allowed to. And so we're doing that work again, and yes, I am very tired and frustrated.
I guess the word we're looking for, we're recruiting teachers, and that's also a hard process. We had a meeting, and it's amazing how many people actually really believe that the law passed and give license to colleagues, to people thinking actually that, oh yes, we are oh yes, we are too radical, and I don't, we weren't radical enough. I mean, I just think
Yeah, it's just really unfortunate, just reflecting on some things, coming across Malcolm X's, some of his talks, you know. We got a bunch of political chumps in this town, right? To believe that it's okay to cower to a racist law. I mean, culturally relevant, that's what we do. Mexicans is who we are. It's not a dirty word. So we have to, I really believe we have to acknowledge that, honor that struggle, and call out people for what it is. It's being a political chump. And that's what transpired in the district. We have to be, you know, we have to come together and say, how are we going to repair this? How are we going to provide that decolonizing, that liberatory education for our students? You know, we've taken a 40+ year step backwards. You know, you got teachers in this district that you know, we talk about ideology, that's really important. We talk about the corazon. You know, you have that right here, sitting right next to me. You have the best in the nation, bar none. Despite, you know, we have a scholar that is speaking here. None of those scholars have done what these sisters and brothers have done here in the classroom. And that is provide a liberatory education, an education that is based on a strong cultural, personal identities, fluid identities. And that is key, and that is critical. But again, this framework that we have provided is being utilized throughout the nation. You know, there's possibilities are endless. Because this battle was lost here, we're still struggling. You know, we're still struggling for that humanity, for that rehumanization, for decolonization. And we're going to continue and move forward and do that work.
And I just want to, there's a lot of pain, obviously, a lot of passion, and we got to work through it. We're trying to work through it together in a positive way. So even though we have these feelings, what's the future going to look like? And the reality is, even if an MAS is established again, the dream has always been that the younger generation right now, let's say the ones in their 20s and early 30s, that generation of teachers, we got jacked in that because it was supposed to be a natural evolution, you know, phase in, fade out, like a good song, like, you know, when you're on the ones and twos and you're the DJ. Right? We were going to fade ourselves out as the young ones faded on it because they you know, as I go through my data, and my data is my students' voices, right? That's one of my dissertations, my students' voices. They're so less colonized than us. I mean, you can hear it in our comments right now. I mean, there's still that passion to want to throw hands, but we also, like Salo says, we're calling it out and we reflect upon it and we're like, okay, so the work we're doing now is building that future, as Sean just said. Sean kind of just went right through not really being himself at this very moment, you know, and so that's eventually what we got to get back to. And the future I dream is that we are able to build that bigger, broader, young, passionate teacher, youth force that will take our work and reimagine it way better than anything we could ever thought, because of course they're less hung up than we are. They got it from the root. And what's scary right now, like Jose said, though, at the same time, that's the dream. Scary right now is that we're playing that mañana game, and that our children that are in TUSD schools right now, they're not getting that decolonizing, loving experience so that they can reimagine the work that we did in that lovely way. And that's why when somebody said, wait till the election or mañana, that's where that passion came from. Because what you're telling me is the lives of our students right now don't matter to you. Because you don't tell people that if they do. You don't do it. So as we work through our pain, we're going to work through it in a way that continues to transform this place and ourselves to be better human beings.
Okay,
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the efforts that are being made on non-traditional education level, like in the community. What efforts are actually happening to keep this alive just in a non-formal way? Because we're talking about the formal education process, but what's happening in the communities to keep MAS alive?
Will you rephrase that question, please?
Oh, sorry, yes. The question was, what's happening in the communities in the non-traditional ways to keep MAS going? So what are some projects that are happening that aren't within the structure of public schools or traditional education?
I nominate my beautiful wife.
We're tired of talking.
You know, I think that there's a lot of things happening. We have a community that is hungry for you know, spaces where they can learn about their culture, learn about their identities, and you know, we see them all over the place. And you know, we're part of a group that is in Chicano indigenous community, and you know, we come together once a month in a little gym, a little boxing gym, and we provide for the community cultural workshops. And so, you know, people come from, it's real nearby one of the schools where, you know, I worked, Ochoa, and a lot of the families come, and you know, we provide that teaching, the framework. And we have nanas and tatas that come, we have babies, and you know, it's just a beautiful happening and beautiful event with just the community. And so, you know, we keep the framework alive that way. We keep our, you know, these spaces alive that way. And so, you know, it's not just our community, but you know, they're throughout. And a lot of people recognize what MAS was, and you know, what we could provide, and you know, we're in those types of spaces, thankfully.
There are also mecha groups all over. There are community groups that put on classes. I feel like there's a lot going on. Could be more.
We have another question. I just wanted to add, we also have a class that both Curtis Acosta and Jose and Norma Gonzalez taught for college credit, a Mexican American Studies class, because it's outlawed. We offered it through Prescott College, where the high school students could get college credit for Chicano literature and social studies, and they met on the weekends. And so that was in a, you know, Curtis started it as Sunday school in a community center, and then we got college credit for it, and then Chito, our organization, raises the money so that the students can do that for free. So, you have a question?
I think it's an accurate assessment of any statement we're saying that my colleague and I also show precious knowledge in our class. And I showed it a few weeks ago, and I have several all of them teachers in Central Connecticut. And they said, wouldn't it be nice if we could have also had our students engage the same way, because they're all feeling down, they have to do teacher evaluation, and their future is determined based on their standardized tests. And so they asked the question, and I'm asking you, how can we then transfer that to all teachers, because really they would have liked their students and themselves to also be engaged as they saw in the video. You know, all of you I recognize from the movie, from the, how could they be inspired, because they're really down and not feeling really excited about going to work?
Well, I just want, that's a real hard question to answer. I mean, but like for me, I remember a few years back, before I even taught in Mexican American Studies, I was about 26 years old, something like that. I think Imelda was probably at Wakefield at the time. Imelda Cortez right here is one of my former students. And she's going to be a teacher. She's getting her master's degree. But I remember, I think it was my third year of teaching, and we were doing this new reading program. And we totally, we had a great principal at the time. And her name was Maria Patterson. And she changed the whole way the school was structured. She said, these kids are going to Pueblo High School, they can't even read and write. How are they going to be successful? You know, if they can't read and write, I don't care how much content you throw at them or whatever, they're not going to be successful. So we had these kids for 4 hours a day. I remember there was so much like protesting by teachers. I gotta have the same kids, because it's secondary in middle school. I have to have the same kids for 4 hours. I can't deal with these kids for 4 hours. You know, and I kind of looked at it opposite. I was like, I get to have them for 4 hours. Just imagine what I could do with them 4 hours a day. You know, and so we had stations. And anyway, to make a long story short, at the end of, not even the end of the year, it was the middle of the year, my students had jumped in reading levels, and in about 2 months, they had gone up, like 62% of the students went up 1 or 2 grade levels or more in reading, and 90% of them went up at least 1 grade level. And the professional development lady, her name was Darcy Jack, or is Darcy Jack too. And she comes into my classroom and she's like, hey Sabo, what did you do with these kids? And I didn't do anything with them. I said, all I did was, I had them for 4 hours. I treated them with love, I treated them with respect. I gave them some curriculum that they could understand and relate to. And voila, it works. And it's funny because I knew that kind of approach. When I went to that first conference, I already knew at that time that approach would work with kids, like any kid. Any kid is gonna respond to curriculum where they can see themselves in it.
I just wanted to, you know, what came to mind as you were talking about that, you know, again, looking at the frameworks that we use, all of them were rooted in teaching a human being. So we're not in the business of teaching how to test. We're not in the business of teaching them how to, you know, do well in tests. That was never, ever, that's the furthest thing from our minds. And so what we did is we focused on the human beings that came to our class every day and how we can humanize them. And so what we did is we focused on the human measures. And so I think that what the Now We All Lead provides them is a purpose in life. Because that's what we're all looking for, regardless of where you're from. You know, as a planetary citizen, you're looking for a purpose in life. What is your purpose in life? And so, you know, once you're able to identify that, then you're acquiring an identity. And so, you know, they acquire an academic identity, a cultural identity, an identity that is stable. And so that's what y'all need to focus on, is the human measures. Those tests are always going to be there. And like Salo said, I teach 3rd grade right now, and I have this disgusting law that I have to deal with. If my students don't pass that test, they don't go to 4th grade. That's what the law says. You know, and that's how they determine the beds that they're going to have to produce for them in prison because they can't read. You know, and so that's what I have to deal with, that law. And I'll be damned, I'll be goddamn, I'll be damned if I hold any of my students back, you know, because of a test. And that's what I have to deal with. That's what I go every day, and I have to, you know, work with these students to humanize them, you know, so that they can pass these ridiculous tests that are going to determine the rest of their lives. You know, so you focus on the human measures, and that's what we did, and that's what's powerful. And you can look at my kids' test scores.
I'd like to answer that real quick. Just you know, this is like culturally relevant, right? And I think wherever you're at, you know, immerse yourself. If you're in DC, immerse yourself in you know, African American history. To know a people is to know their story. You know, and I'm not talking superficial. You know, we're in the middle of Arizona, real close. We're in the middle, smack in the middle of Arizona, real close to the border. And so our classes were you know, predominantly Mexican American. And so, you know, what's amazing to me is, you know, when our kids went out and took over the Dias, you know, they were called militant. You know, and to this day, I had a teacher tell me, what they did, you know, and maybe it's a little bit about the militancy and the students. And y'all, we hear that time and time, and it's exhausting. You know, or that we were a cultish, and it's exhausting. But you know, when our European American brothers did that up in Wisconsin, well, that was democracy in action. You know, and I want you to marinate on that, because these are our kids, right? And so, if it's relevant, if they see themselves reflected, and they're treated like my brothers and sisters here said, y'all, and you love them, not just like and you love them, what Angelo Valenzuela says, authentic caring. They're going to do things, and they're going to be these beautiful people, and that they're not all going to go to universities, but you're going to see them in a community engaged in that Huitzilopochtli, transforming the world in a positive manner. And so I would say that, you know, to make it relevant, to teach the measures, the human measures, and not worry so much about the, you know, what them as teachers are being, you know, evaluated by. And I'll end with this, and that is that, you know, if you're not pushing the envelope, you're not doing your job. We have a responsibility to our children, and if you're just there, earn a paycheck, you know, you're not doing your job. And so, you know, there's a war, and I hate to use that type of ideology. There's a struggle for our children's humanity, and that's why we do what we do.
Okay, one question back here before we finish.
Primero, gracias por una muestra de comunidad, cariño y coraje. Those are our key words at the conference: community, caring, and courage. And I actually wanted to say what you said, which is one of the most angering thing about the critique of the students was, well, they weren't very polite. Yeah. They weren't very nice. Well, nice never brought us any social change. And I love that you said fuck and you said goddamn. Because I do. Because until we're willing to speak truth to power, which isn't done in kind of the discourse of academia, the power structures, I mean, that we have to have the courage, just like the kids do, to stand up and call bullshit bullshit, so that we can move the agenda forward. Because civil discourse and telling people, if you've only been nicer, is a colonizing way to keep things from happening. In other words, you know, if you just would calm down and not be so upset, we could have listened to you, is the way that people in power have always oppressed and suppressed and marginalized people who need their rights by telling them that they just didn't do it the right way. And so, you know, I think when I show that movie, I'm like, look at these kids, they are awesome. They are awesome. They are smart. They are powerful. They are well-spoken. They are clear about what happened. And so everything you did to make that happen is the best thing that you have done.
So I think we have a couple more hands, but I do believe that we're out of time. So I think the teachers would be willing to stick around for a few minutes afterwards if people want to come up and ask questions. But, and then the discussion is in room Catalina.
Over in the Executive Conference Center, level 2.
Level 2, the Pasadena Center.